Hello and welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm your host, Kathy Healey, along with my co-host, M.E. Macri. On today's show, we're going to be talking to two well-known former Wakefield warriors. From the class of '77, we have former Senator and former Ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown. And from the class of 1974, we have former Essex County District Attorney, who at the same time became one of the country's top stand-up comedians, Paul Murphy, also known as Paul D'Angelo. Welcome to the show, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate that.
It's good to see my old buddy.
Yeah. Sure wasn't like 69 you're in high school?
Oh, he's starting already.
Like
I'm getting heckled by a senator.
Yeah. Now, how do you guys know each other again?
Well, he used to hang out.
I used to date his mother.
I thought, I'll be the senator, you be the comedian, okay? we had mutual friends. My friend Jay Moore, his brother Bob, who you idolized. Bob was a great basketball player, and Bob was nicknamed Ace. You were Deuce, right? And so he was Scotty back then, you know? I was Paulie, he was Scotty, and we were pals, and he went on to bigger and better things, and I left being a lawyer to be a comedian.
That's great.
Well, actually, we used to hang out at Bobby and Jay Moore's house, and it was at Bryant Street. 26 Bryant, I think.
You got a good memory.
Wow.
And,
25, I think.
25,
26.
And we used to play hoop and really just have so much fun. He was a real mentor because, you know, I'm from a broken family, didn't have much guidance, so hanging out with somebody who was, you know, kind of fun but also had some discipline was really, really good for me growing up. And Murph and the others, they were such good role models back then.
Oh, that's
You know,
great.
that's funny, when you were like the height of your popularity, they were doing all those national stories on you. I read, and in fact, I mentioned it to you one time that in a national magazine said, Scott Brown grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in Wakefield. I said, is that the side with the Friendlies or the Dunkin' Donuts? Where's the wrong side of the tracks in Wakefield?
I know, really. So tell us some of your favorite memories, both you guys, of Wakefield High School.
Go ahead.
Favorite memories of Wakefield High School? Playing sports, obviously, and speaking of the Warriors, I was proud. I was proud to be a Warrior. I mean, the majorettes would come out at the halftime with the headdresses on and everything like that, and that was something to aspire to be a Warrior. It's motivating and stuff like that. Now they'll probably rename them the Hamsters or something like that until a hamster complains, you know.
Yeah. Well, I actually, my mom was a cheerleader, and you know, we take the Warrior symbol very seriously and treat it very respectfully. Mm-hmm. You know, I was a little surprised they had a vote, even though it was non-binding. It passed, and then regardless, they just did whatever they wanted anyway. That's why people like me and others get involved in politics, because you know, people aren't, quite frankly, doing the right thing for the citizens of Wakefield or for the state or for the country. Mm-hmm. But my favorite memories, I was a solid student. I was the president of the Junior Classical League, which is a group of Latin and Greek scholars. And Paula Smith, who's passed, was my Latin teacher, and she inspired me to get involved and take Latin. Who took Latin back then? And did very well. And,
sure, that's coming in handy.
Yeah, it actually did in the LSATs.
Oh, yeah.
And I placed out of language in college. So it was perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously Brad and Judy Simpson, they're not in the high school, but you know, Brad was obviously involved in the coaching. I had Sonny Lane. Yep. For me, the athletics, you know, Coach D, Commander, Coach Duff, Coach Kelly, you know, obviously Brad and everybody, they were just such role models at a time when I needed some guidance for sure.
And you went on to Tufts University after?
Went to Tufts, played hoop there, was the captain, and then off to Boston College Law School. Had a great experience in all factors. Really, I'm very blessed.
That's great. And Paul, you went off to BC?
I tell jokes. You know.
You went to BC as well?
Yeah, I went to BC, yeah. Boston College undergrad, and Suffolk Law.
They didn't let you into BC Law?
You know what? They lost my transcripts 3 times, and by the time they said you're accepted, I had already sent a deposit to Suffolk, so I ended up going to Suffolk, and it all worked out well because I'm a comedian. So it really didn't make a difference.
Now, Paul, how did COVID affect being a comedian the past 2
Oh,
years?
geez. Well, it all shut down altogether. It was March of that year. It was right at St. Patrick's Day. I still did shows. I probably maybe 3 or 4 shows a month. I turned down more shows. I turned down tens of thousands of dollars in corporate shows because they wanted me to do Zoom shows, and I said, I can't. It's not meant to be done that way. And there were a lot of things I turned down, but I ended up having a whole show about the COVID. I called it COVIDiots, and I had a whole 45-minute, 50-minute show about COVID, and then it started to come back, and it was still a little roller coaster because I'd be in, say, like a Lowell Memorial Auditorium. I did a show there, and the people were so spread out, and it was
laughter needs that close contact to hear and feel it.
The best atmosphere is when everyone's jammed in together. You got a low ceiling, and it's very personal and everything, and now it's it's pretty much come back,
And what's the definition?
Except my mother's calling me up, going, another comedian got attacked on the stage. You better be careful.
Oh, gee.
Oh, she's so worried. I said, Ma, I don't antagonize people. And
When you were an attorney, what brought you into comedy from when you?
making $18,000 a year as a assistant district attorney, that helped. I couldn't pay my bar tab every month, and I'd be taking odd jobs and bartending and things like that just to make it, and drawing for logos for companies and stuff just to make ends meet. And then I had no intention of going into it. I was funny with friends. I grew up around comedy. My father was funny. He was a role model. My uncle, my father told jokes. My uncle told stories. Yeah. I was probably a byproduct of both of them. And then I used to start to go into Boston to watch comedy, and never thought of doing it myself, but I did a friend's bachelor party, and it was like a roast, and I got up for 45 minutes, had a few cocktails before I did it, and everyone came, we want to hire you for this. I said, no, it was a one-time deal, but now I started to go back as a critic, and I started looking at people. I said, maybe I could do this, but I couldn't afford to go through that obligatory phase where you suck, like everybody does, and I said, because I was such a good lawyer. So I worked behind the scenes. I wrote. I wasn't worried about my stage persona because I'd probably done 100 trials by then. And when I first went up on stage, I loved it. I got the bug. It was a one-time thing. I changed my name because I didn't know that if the district attorney, Kevin Burke of Essex County, if he would allow me to do it. I was kind of blazing new ground. So my friends used to call me Angelo in college because I grew up in the Gulch. Everything in my life was Italian. And so I said, it's a one-time thing. In fact, my mother said, I'm glad you got this out of your system. That was her words of encouragement. And I only did probably about a dozen open mics or so, and quit because my parents were on my back.
Yeah.
And then I kept writing. And the next year I was ready to take a job with a couple of law firms in Boston. I took some time to decide which one I was going to go with, and at the last minute I panicked. I called up Mike Clark, who's Lenny Clark's brother, and Barry Katz, who went on to develop Last Comic Standing and everything. And I lied. I was reading off a list of clubs in New York. Oh, I was at these clubs. Can I do an audition? And I went to do an audition. They said, get your book out. And all of a sudden I was headlining anywhere from 4 to 7 nights a week and doing the DA's job.
Wow.
And supervising a couple times the busiest jury session in Massachusetts and working every night. And actually the best times of my life, I had 4 divorce guys come and live with me. I had a house for divorced men. They'd come to my house with like 1 suitcase and a green plastic trash bags with all their belongings. I got no place to go. I said, come in. And then a year later, they'd go, thanks a lot. And there'd be another guy standing there. I go, come on in. So. And,
that's awesome.
and so it just got started, and 35 years later, still doing it.
Still doing it.
I admire that for both of you, because you had many jobs, and so did you. I couldn't believe how many jobs you were doing at one time, just to take care of your family, just to survive at some points, just to make sure, like you being a lawyer, doing the modeling, doing the whatever you could do You were always somebody who was like, you would say yes to any
I
job.
had a centerfold up on my wall.
Still does. It's on your screensaver too, I've heard. So. But yeah, obviously, I always felt that, what if I couldn't be a lawyer? Well, I'd have the military. What if I couldn't? And I have, so it was always just a what if, almost like just to make sure that I wasn't missing something or I wouldn't make a mistake. So I just did everything. So anyway.
That's great. So what made you want to be a lawyer?
I'm not sure. Oh, I know why. God, I know why. I remember I had to take my dad to court to get child support. We were getting $25 a week. I was at Tufts and I had no money. My mother had no money. I had nothing. And I needed like $50 a week, and I had to take my dad to court in Essex, probate court. And then the way that it saw, I said, wow, this is very interesting. And I said, I want to help people like me. And then my mom, as you know, as you read my book, a lot of violence in my family, and just seeing the court system and how they treated, women, quite frankly, that didn't have a lot of, back then, I mean, the 70s, 80s, women had very few advocates. And so I wanted to make sure that I did a lot of divorce work until the last day. We were in front of Judge Harmon fighting about pots and pans. I said, "That's it, I'm done. That's it, done." But it's a good profession if you do it right.
That's the same way I felt when I was a defense attorney, because I used to say I did good things for bad people, and then I had I was very successful at it. But then I had a motor vehicle homicide case up in Gloucester, and this kid had no remorse. He ran down a high school honor roll student, and the family was crying, and I was the bad guy all of a sudden. And I said, I could be in Vegas on a cruise ship. What am I doing this for? And that was it. And I took I wound down and moved out to West Coast, and that was it. So.
Right. And the National Guard, what got you into the National Guard?
Well, actually, it was the blizzard of '78, and I remember that I was at Tufts. I think I was a freshman or a sophomore. Yeah, I was a freshman. And I remember going and seeing them save people on the highway. People were dying, and John Encarnacio, the Encarnacio. So John was the battalion commander down at the 101st Engineer Battalion, right down at the Rotary there. And I remember he and my mom, he was the captain of the football team, my mom was a cheerleader, and so they were very close growing up. And I remember seeing him at the football game Thanksgiving, and he was in his uniform. I go, hey, I saw you guys did an amazing job on the highways, and it was great. He says, yeah, you should come down and say hi to the guys. Next thing you know,
wow.
1979.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and so it was because of that. And I started out as an enlisted man at PFC because I had college, and ended up, I had to get somebody's coffee, some new second lieutenant down at the battalion. I'm like, screw you, I'm a sophomore at Tufts University. I don't need to get your coffee, get it yourself. And then that's when I decided to go into officer candidate school and become an officer, and said, I will never ask anybody to get me my coffee, and lead by example. If you're going to dig a fighting position, you participate in it. If you're going to do something, you lead. So that's always been my philosophy, whether it's in sports, whether it's in business, whether it's in the military, is don't ask anyone to do something you wouldn't want to do yourself.
Speaking of sports, basketball you still play, right?
Yeah, I can. I think when you shoot, you can always shoot. But listen, I ran cross country, did outdoor track, played basketball, and I'm a triathlete now. I've been doing triathlons for 25 years. Been on the U.S. Team. The last race I did was a couple of weeks before COVID in Lausanne, Switzerland. Was the World Championships. But yeah, I dig it. I'm an elite amateur. It's a lot of fun. Keeps me lean and mean and focused, and but it beats up your body. I had my knee replaced.
Oh, geez.
Really?
Which I did only because I got hit by a car like 25 years ago, and I'm muscling through it. But it's unbelievable now. So.
What about the swimming part of the triathlon?
Yeah, you just get in and I used to be the worst swimmer, and then I took a lesson from a guy who swam around Manhattan, around Catalina Island, and across the English Channel, and now I'm coming out first. And I really dig it. I really enjoy it. I have some underwater headphones. I just go. I have a bucket list thing is to swim from Rye Beach out to the Isle of Shoals. It's like 7 miles. That's something I want to try to do before I get too old.
Good for you.
I asked the guy who did triathlons. I said, he said, first you swim 5 miles, and I said, what do you mean first? I said, take a nap, right? And he says,
beer.
well, as soon as you get out of the water, you immediately get on a bicycle and you pedal like 120 miles. And I said, with a wet bathing suit? On a rubber seat? I says, you're going to race yourself. What the hell is going on? I put some powder on my pants, then I run a marathon. I says, you should crack some egg in your shorts. You could bake cupcakes while you're running.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I really enjoy the balance of the people. The people are really, really nice, you know. And
That's great.
so it's just fun, you know, keep that competitive edge.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about New Zealand and what you did, you know, as
Well, I was,
ambassador.
you know, honored to serve any president, quite frankly, to represent New Zealand, Cook, Niue, Samoa, and our interest in Antarctica. And I was the first guy out the door behind Israel by a couple of weeks, and my job was to push back against China and what they're doing in the ASEAN Indo-Pacific region, and you know, push back every single day. And we were very, very successful. Do trade deals, because what they're doing down there is they're over leveraging Pacific Island nations and grabbing UN votes. Oh, you can't repay us. Oh, we'll take that harbor. We'll take that airstrip. You know, building and militarizing islands in the middle of nowhere, changing the law of the air and law of the sea that's been in place for centuries. I mean, what they're doing is just wrong. Not an enemy, but definitely a competitor, and they're not playing by the rules. So I did that every single day, and it was really an honor to serve.
That's nice. And your wife obviously went with you. Did your girls go with you as
No,
well?
no, they're older. You know, Ariana's a veterinarian, and Ayla's Country 102.5 is the morning talk show host. But, you know, yeah, she was there. She was the president of the Diplomatic Spouses for 2 years and really participated in every event, every official event. And the cool thing is I had a little different feel. I would have loved to have you come over, but had John and Pat Lyons come over, you know, who you probably know them. They're in.
It's beautiful down there, yeah.
And my house was decorated with rock and roll displays. So I had the original drum kit from Kiss, where Eric Singer lent it to me. I had a massive Kiss display, Joan Jett, Cheap Trick, Dropkick Murphys, you know, Alice Cooper, you know, Warren, Firehouse. I had 40 displays around the house. We had an official area, you know, with, you know, Abraham Lincoln and all that stuff. But the main thrust was rock and roll, because what do people all agree on? Music, sports, family, and food.
Yeah.
Okay, and my job was to neutralize any bad feelings towards America. I had a rock band. Last event was 15,000 people in front of at Beervana at Sky Stadium.
Wow.
Have a band here. We know we're booked all the time. So that rock and roll diplomacy was very, very, very effective.
Wow.
Aren't you doing a show at the Kowloon?
No, we actually but we're doing Wally's Pub up in Hampton Beach. We're doing the Outdoor Seashell, Indian Ranch. I mean, you
When
go
did
to
you get stopped playing the guitar?
scottbrown-diplomats.com.
When did you get stopped playing the guitar?
About 8 years. I started about 8 years ago. So if I may, I don't want to hog the
no.
time, but so I'm in the U.S. Senate. I'm doing a music pirating copyright conference where all the artists come in, and 30 of them come into my office, and Rick Nielsen's there, and I go, oh my God, I love Rick Nielsen, Cheap Trick. And I go, hey Rick, I got every one of your records. You're like my favorite performer, and he's a little quirky, and he's like, well, thank you, and we hit it off. And then so we did a lot of work on that issue, the Music Modernization Act that President Trump signed with Kid Rock. That was the beginning of my bill. Anyway, so break, I lose, and then in February of 13, I started playing. I said, yeah, I might as well learn how to play the guitar. So I learned 5 Cheap Trick songs: Dream, Please, Surrender, I Want You, Want Me, Hello Kitties, and Southern Girls.
That's 5?
4 months later, they're at the Hampton Beach Casino. They say, Scott, you got to come down. I go down. I'm half in the, well, probably almost all in the wrapper. and I go down and I go, Rick, hey, as we're leaving, Rick, by the way, if you need anyone to teach you how to play the guitar, I'm your guy. He goes, you play? I said, yeah, I've been playing since February. It's June. He pushes me out the door. He's playing right where that camera is. He's playing. He goes, yeah. He goes, no. Then he finally goes, Senator, can you play? I go, yes. I jump up. The manager comes, grabs me on stage. He's coming down. He goes, Scott, we love you. Can you really play? I go, yeah. What are we playing? He goes, Surrender. He said, oh, that's my favorite song. He says, it's in the key of G. I said, I have no idea what that is. As long as it's like the Budokan album, we're good. And he goes, that's G. I said, let's go.
Oh, that's a good
22,000
story.
That's a good
YouTube hits
story.
later, and I've been playing with Firehouse Warren, played with Cheap Trick in Australia 7
my
times.
God.
You know, Alice Cooper. I love it. It's like you with the comedy stuff. Get on stage. It's just. I
I
love
play
it.
guitar too, and
Yeah, you're
and harmonica with my brother's
Yeah, I
band.
watch
Well,
it on
we gotta
Facebook.
get you-
You're a Cheap Trick at Budokan. I was at Cafe Italia.
I gotta get you up, man.
Yeah, because you guys have a lot in common.
Right,
The
the
lawyer, the band,
I thought I did
authors.
pretty well in life till I started hearing everything that Scott's done, and now I feel
no,
like
don't be silly.
Now, what about Fox News? You're a regular guest there too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I'm on Hannity. I'm posted as a contracted contributor. Right now, I'm the chairman of the Competitiveness Council, which is an effort to push back against Congress and all the crappy laws they're pushing on high-tech industry. So, you know, busy coaching Rye Junior High, outdoor track, basketball, and cross country, and new grandfather. So, you know, are you a grandfather yet?
no, I don't have any. I don't have any children. My mother looked at my brothers and sisters. I have two brothers and a sister across the table. Like, you know my mom.
Yep.
She goes, you know what, Paul? I just realized you're my only child that hasn't been married. I said, I'm the only one that hasn't been divorced. What are you talking- I just cut out the middleman. I cut out the middleman.
That's cool. That's great.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Any future plans in politics? You?
Yeah, just
Both
looking
you
at
guys?
Me?
Both you guys?
I vote for you. in a second.
Fundraisers. I'll do fundraisers.
Yeah, listen, I have
I'll
one
do a
more-
fundraiser for your wife.
Thank you. Well done.
Okay.
I'd
I
be
have
glad
one
to.
more run in me, and but it's not now. Right now, my wife Gail's running for Congress up in New Hampshire, and they're doing very well. She was just so fed up after we got back and saw the Afghanistan pullout, and she says, "Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to get involved." And it's her and people like her, that whether it's CRT in our schools, you know, whether it's the border, whether it's fentanyl killing our kids, you know, people need to stand up. Whether it's the Warrior logo, where people get involved and, you know, say, "Hey, listen, I want to make a stand." It's important.
Took me a while to dig myself out of a financial hole after I helped the Taliban buy an Air Force.
And Paul, you do a lot of artwork. I saw you on
Yeah.
Facebook too. That's
Yeah.
really
Just
impressive.
Talk about the art that you had, Big Poppies.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
what was it? 2 nights ago? Big Poppy was the guest speaker at the Salem State Speakers Series, and they asked me to come in to warm up the crowd. And
Yeah.
my friend, a few years ago, he wrote a book about the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry. So he did 16 or 18 pictures to illustrate the book, and we couldn't get licensing. It's impossible to get licensing from Major League Baseball. So they basically were sitting in a folder in my house. But one of them was Big Poppy. You know how he used to go like
yeah.
this
Yeah, I
to
saw
God
that
after
on
he hit a home run.
Facebook.
So I did that with
Yeah.
God wearing a baseball cap, saying, you know, no problem. And I brought it, and he signed it for me, which is kind of cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is
Great. He's a
cool.
great guy.
Oh, really good guy.
Really,
Yeah,
yeah,
very
yeah,
nice,
yeah.
very personable.
Yep.
Tall. He's tall. He's
Tall. He's
like
still in
about
great
6'4".
shape too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And all of your artwork is, do you sell it or do you just?
Everybody's on my back to sell it.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
should.
but I only started painting a few years ago, and my family has a house up near Gloucester, and my uncle grew up in the Depression, so. You know, and my father too. You know, my father. I remember him yelling at me for taking too long a piece of dental floss because you know, back in
Cost
those
money.
days, back
Cost
in those
money.
days. So my uncle had stuff on the wall of this beautiful house that was horrible. I mean, it was all fake. You remember, like the old barber shops? They'd put stuff in the window,
Yes.
and all the colors would be faded
Yep.
except for the blue. He had those on the wall. I said, let me buy some artwork for the house. No. I said, the only way I'm going to do it is if I do the artwork myself.
Right.
So I did a whole bunch of Gloucester pictures, and every time I put one picture up on the wall, I took one of the lousy ones down, and I did that. And then I just started painting a few years ago, and I'm kind of learning as I go along, but I'm doing all right.
Very
and
good.
nobody's more surprised than I am when it comes out so good. So.
Really? Yeah. Speaking of your dad, you know, our parents grew up. My
Sure.
mother and your mother grew up together, and our parents used
Her
to
mother
double
was
date.
my godmother.
That's
Yes.
funny.
Yeah.
Wow, small
And
world.
our parents used to double date before you were born.
Yeah.
And my dad just told me today, he's like, tell Paul that his dad used to ask us when we came over to their house for dinner to come up to the attic and watch him play the drums. So every time
No,
we
that
go
was my
over-
uncle. My uncle Vito. He played the sax.
Oh,
He
because I
played the
guess he-
saxophone and the clarinet. But there was probably a drummer up there. But
Yeah.
but he probably had a drummer up there. But
Yeah.
that's the house still live in. The house my grandfather built when he came from Sicily in the 1920s, and I fixed it up. My brothers live in the same house, and I'm back in the Gulch.
What street is that?
Right in Water Street.
Water
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah, the Gulch.
Right
I am a
across from
product
where-
of the Gulch.
Right across from the Bolodrome where they just filmed the George Clooney movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
which made them so happy they haven't renovated it in 50 years. So, you know, oh, good. We're retro.
Oh my gosh.
We're finally
I
coming
used to
back
love
in
go down there.
style.
I haven't
well,
been down there for a while. I got to go down
The thing
there.
we miss down there is Tooties, man. I mean,
Oh,
yeah.
God.
you know, the steak and
Yeah.
cheese.
When I moved
used
to
get
LA,
like 20
I
of
was
them.
desperate one day, and I went in a Subway, and I went,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
grew up
yeah,
next
yeah.
to Tooties. I couldn't.
I know.
Yeah.
Chicken cutlets, forget about it.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
the best.
And Scott, you've been to Studio 54, right?
Oh yeah, I was.
Yeah,
I
that was
used
in
to
your
be
book,
a
yeah.
mainstay in there. Yeah,
Yeah. Who did you see in
Really?
there?
I saw everybody.
Oh my
it
God.
was,
Any funny memories from that?
there's a couple in my book, but yeah. Listen, I used to hang out with Rick James when he was, you know, normal. You know, obviously Christy Brinkley, everybody.
Wow.
You know, we used to have parties there in our name and calendar parties. You know, used to walk right in when lines were around the block, and it was as decadent as you think. And it's one of the reasons I ended up leaving and going into the military, because I think if I stayed, I would have been dead.
Yeah.
You know, just doing stuff. I'm like, what am I doing? You know, coming home. You probably do this all the time still.
Yeah,
but
well, I was at the
coming-
99 in Linfield. You were at
Coming-
Studio 54.
coming home in the middle of like
I was thrilled
9
when they
o'clock
gave
in
me
the
the
morning.
cheese that I could do. Oh, thanks, I got extra cheese. I've been coming here and give me a cheese, didn't you?
I think that's
You're
the
a
one
Christy
thing I liked
Brinkley.
about the book was that you said sometimes you would just go because they had the appetizers. So you knew you would get a meal.
Yeah. Well, when I was in New York, and you know, struggling, you go to the where they have the happy hours, and you go
Yeah.
and get a Coke, and then wolf down 5,000 meatballs.
Well, yeah, I used to go to we used to go to the happy hours down the Cape and stuff like that, and they used to do rock and roll trivia, and that's how my friends drank, because back in those days they'd give you like a bottle of schnapps if you won or something, and pass it around to my friends, and that's the only way you could afford to do it.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I think back, you know, I was arrested at 12 for stealing a Judge Zoll. You remember Judge
Yep.
Zoll?
Oh, I was in front of Judge Zoll.
Yeah, he gave me a
yeah.
chance. He, you know, it's crazy.
Is that the Ann and Hope thing?
Yeah, when I stole
yeah.
records.
Oh, yeah, I was friends with you back then. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh my God.
Do you
were
remember that
friends of
part
mine.
when that happened with him?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
guys
No,
are
no,
friends
I-
They
with
knew. No, he wasn't there. He wasn't there. But
Just gonna say,
But
wait, that was
bottom
the
line
part.
is, the judge took me in his chambers, which you can't do now, and we started talking about music because I stole records, you know. And then he said, you know, you have any brothers or sisters? I said, yeah, a half brother and 2 half sisters. Oh, your mom, that's her out there. I said, yeah, the one yelling, that's her. And by then they were married and divorced 3 times each. And my parents were married and divorced 4 times each. So as a result, it was a little dysfunctional. But I was drinking, driving, and stealing my mom's car at 12.
Wow.
All right, and it's really all your fault, because it was the parties that you need me to drive.
I didn't do any of
You
those
need
bad
me to-
things, so I mean,
You
I don't know
needed
why.
me to drive you because you were so inebriated at these parties. I had to drive you. No, I'm
Oh
kidding.
my God.
But
That's
I'm
not
kidding.
true. In
That's
those
not
days, that's the
true.
way
Oh.
you drove.
That's not true. It isn't true. But I got caught, and the judge says, you know, you play sports? I said, yeah. He said, what do you play? All sports, but I love basketball. You know, I love the structure, but I love being an individual. How many points do you average? Yeah, about 30 points a game. Wow, that's amazing. I was in 8th grade, like 7th grade, 6th grade, I don't know. And he says, wow, how do you think your brothers and sisters would like to see you play basketball in jail? Because that's where you're going.
Right,
And they
right.
want you to write me a 1,500-word essay and how I let my
Oh,
brothers
Judge
and
Zoll used to
sisters
do
in.
stuff like that. He used
I
to come
know,
up
I
with the
know.
craziest
Yeah.
dispositions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, so don't you know, I did it, and years later when he was dying of pancreatic cancer, he called me and he said, can you come over to my house? He was still in Salem. I go, yeah. I've always wanted to ask him, Judge, why me? Because you're right.
Yeah.
And he says, Scott, I tried it like 10 or 12 other times. It didn't work. But with you, I knew it would work. But you
Wow.
called the clerk and you said, hey, listen, I'm not a very good writer. Can I print it? I don't have a typewriter. Can I pen or pencil? Can I use the margins? You know, and he knew right then that I cared enough to get the job done. But not for him. There's no doubt in my mind that I'd be dead or in jail.
Yep.
None whatsoever.
And you had a lot of other people like Brad Simpson, who was my 7th grade social studies teacher.
Brad and
Can
Judy,
you
well, they
talk a
named
little
the
bit
kid
about-
Scott.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
Scott Simpson, and that's how, but not for Brad and Judy. I'll tell it, I don't want to hog it, but you know these people too. But
Yeah.
so Judy, right?
Yep.
You know, Hogan, but now I feel bad. Nobody's named a kid after
she
me.
She wasn't my teacher, but she would always keep an eye on me because of Brad, because of basketball. So I'm walking down the hall, and some young lady said something mean to me about my personal life, and I went right at her. And I had hair like yours. My hair was
wow.
down to there. And I'll never forget it. She grabbed me by the back of the hair. She threw me in the classroom, slammed the door, and started yelling at me, "Don't you realize how lucky you are? And that poor girl for the rest of her life." And I'm saying to myself, lucky? My parents are like total wreck, and I'm like totally screwed up. What do you mean I'm lucky? You have everything in the world going for this poor girl's going to remember. And they said, "Isn't that hair yours? Come here." And she started cutting my hair. Like right there in the classroom.
And that was Judy Simpson?
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes.
some teacher did that nowadays.
Oh,
my gosh,
God.
no, we couldn't do that
And
nowadays.
she says, "You can't even see. How are you going to play basketball? Be a leader. You're a leader." You know, it's like,
Wow.
So it was like, pow, pow, pow. And that's, then I was just like, in the other story, I know you talk, because I'm
glad.
talking.
You were a real punk. I'm glad I didn't. You might have turned me to the dark
So
side.
listen, the Walton School, my yard was in the back of the Walton School. And I used to, and all the kids who were in the summer school who flunked, they were there, and I would hide in the woods. And when they would play, I would go out and play with them. And then I would go back. And one day she saw me, and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I live here." She says, "You don't go here?" I go, "No. I just like to play with the kids, and play softball and baseball." She brought me in and she gave me a dictionary. She says, "Look up the word knee." And I went right to the ends. And she says, you should come here. I was like a C student. I didn't need to go. And right there, it's like, I got to get my what together. That was it.
Did you live on Eustis or what street?
No, we lived on Salem Street then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I just like the fact that there was these people in your life that at critical moments, small acts of kindness that just helped you through. And I like then that when you were a lawyer, you also you paid it forward again.
I use that same tactic. I don't know if you had the opportunity when you were practicing, because you were in a different situation. It's having kids write essays, because of Judge Zoll. But yeah, listen, I think anybody here and your listeners and viewers will say there's always been somebody in your life that makes an impression, good or bad.
Right. Are you still driving a truck?
No, I had 383,000 miles. It's now a bench. It's a bench.
Oh, wow.
You must have liked it.
Overhauling.
Yeah, overhauling.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we'll talk about the Cosmo picture now. Everyone's going to be...
Talk to Murph.
Yeah.
Talk to me too long.
So your sister sent the picture in,
Yes,
right?
back in the day,
Okay.
I was just in law school, and I got a call from Helen Gurley Brown, and she said, "Hi, you're a finalist." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I hung up. And then they called back. She said, "No, really, your sister sent in a picture. They were looking for a regular guy." And, I was in law school, I was in the military, and, I went and I interviewed, and, that's it.
Wow.
So what did you think when if
I was
somebody
trying to get the centerfold of Mad Magazine.
I was trying to...
What did I think? I said, that's my pal.
I know,
Yeah.
that must have been cool having...
We had
Yeah.
so many friends from Wakefield came and went to Studio 54. A lot of folks that and went out every night, came for weekends. It was, we tried to include, and you got to be grounded, because you can really get, really go do some crazy things, which I did. Anyway, so Murph, what are you doing now? Like how many nights are you performing?
I just finished doing like 11 out of 12 nights, and I tried to. I never had nights off for 35 years, and then all of a sudden, the pandemic, I'm sitting on the couch with the dog watching movies, and I'm going, "This is pretty good." I love the dog and everything, and I tried to cut back in everything, and I got a taste of freedom. I got a taste of, because I gave up. I won't complain, because it's still a job, and I gave up every weekend though for 35 years.
Do you use the same material every night?
I change all the time. That's why.
So if someone went to one show and then they went to the show...
Well, it depends. If you might see me a couple nights in a row, I might keep it but I'm always bringing back old stuff. I get the ADD, so I got to keep it interesting for myself. So I'm always writing. I'm always. Sometimes I'll bring back old routines I haven't done for a long time. So if it's stale to me, then people, like a dog can sense fear.
Yeah.
People would sense if I'm not committed to that. And for me to be committed to it, I have to really, enjoy what I'm doing. So if I don't want to get stale,
So does every writer write their scripts out first, do you think, or no?
Well, you know,
Every
I try to
comedian, I
help
should
out a
say,
lot of
every
new
comedian should.
comedians. I try to help them out with the whole writing process and everything. And you know what, you could say, you know, Scott and I, lawyers and everything, and we're doing different things now, but that background, that law background is so important,
The logic of it all, you have to have that
well,
whole
and you have to be
story.
disciplined. You have to
Yep.
be organized. You have to learn how to write. You have to learn how to present yourself in front of people and everything. And so all those skills, they translate into whether it's a senator or a comedian. You know, so it's not waste. Going to law school and everything, because the foundation that it gives you and everything. And but I tell young comedians, I said, well, first of all, you got to be funny, but also half of it is being professional, because these guys could show up drunk. Imagine
right.
comedians. Most of the comedians I know who are well grounded have another life. They maybe have a full-time job, a family, or something like that. I said, but half of it's being professional, showing up on time, not horrifying the crowd, not being vulgar, not being drunk or high, doing what you're told to do and everything like that. So it's a business. That's the
Right.
business part of it, and that's a big thing too. And you know, I'll go. People ask me to do a show, and I can't do it, and they'll ask me to recommend someone, and I go through the list. I go, oh, I can't really use him or
Right.
anything or whatever. So there's a discipline to it, and a lot of that comes from the law background. I remember telling a comedian one time who I was trying to mentor, and I said, do you have a new joke? Yeah, I have a new joke. And I told me the joke. I said, well, he said, what do you think of it? I said, well, what do you think of it? He said, I think it's a good joke. I said, why don't you want it to be a great joke? And he said, I never thought of it that way. And I told him, I said, sometimes the rewriting process is every bit as important as the original writing of it. And the other thing is, comedy is you're in a unique position that you have instantaneous feedback. It matters if you do something with it. You've got to do something with it. But you can gauge from the crowd. I could write at a desk, but then it seems contrived. I write, like you, I wrote books and stuff, and sitting at a desk, and what I write in a book is not necessarily what I would say on stage, because you have to be more concise, because people don't have that
Right.
attention span. So, so you've got to be concise. That whole rewriting process is every bit as important as the original writing of the joke, and taking that feedback. Until I do it on stage in front
Right.
of people, I can't tell how I can tweak that.
Because you need the laugh, you need the response.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe I'm too verbose and I have to cut it back, or maybe it needs a descriptive word, maybe it needs a pause, maybe
What did the mother bullet say to the father bullet?
I don't know what.
Let's have a BB.
Well, it looks like my job is safe.
I worked really hard. I wrote that out over and over and over.
He's
and
got
I did
the
it all by
dad jokes
myself.
down. He's got the dad jokes down.
I'll open up with that.
I have a very serious question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Take it
Because
away.
I've always wanted to ask these questions
Yeah.
to comedians. Like, what dictates like somebody who's like dropping the F-bomb all the time and somebody who is not? Like, is there a tried and true?
Well, first of all, I tell comedians now, they say, well, should I be dirty? I go, you can be dirty if you work in a club, but where are you going to work? Now, that's how the business has changed too. I don't do clubs that much anymore, but I do fundraisers, corporate events, things like that. And you can't be dirty that way. And I like to walk the edge of what I talk to, but I don't want to alienate
Right.
the crowd. Although now I'm getting to a point where I'm saying, you know what, I need to say what I need to say. So I'm kind of pushing that envelope a little bit. But the F-bomb is like adding spices to a meal. I mean, if you sprinkle it in, I've done a show where I threw a couple F-bombs and people say, oh, you know what, I'm so glad you never swore the whole time. I go, you didn't even notice it,
Right.
because,
Oh, yeah.
but it depends
Because
how
it's
you.
not part of your.
But it depends how you use it too. Do you
entire
use it
act,
in a
right.
vulgar way? Do you use it as a strip of? A lot of my act is about is about people, angst, and comedy really comes from conflict. And I say, what do you mean? You say to someone, what's your life like? I got a great wife, I got great kids, I love my job, great boss, paying all the bills. It's not funny.
Right.
But if you say my wife is on my back, my kids are a pain in the ass, my job, I hate my job, my boss is a jerk, and I can't pay the bill. That's
Right.
where the comedy comes from. So when you have that angst and you're being sarcastic and everything, then that's the way you would talk.
Right.
Sometimes, but if you overdo it, it's no good. It's like putting too much salt in something. Everything. If that's what you're doing, and some people use it as a crutch, and stuff like that. So, and my joke, if I can use if I can use something, to that would validate my anger or something like that, I do it. But in the same token, if I'm doing a corporate show, I can take that word out.
Right.
And it's still, but it's kind of missing it. But people get the right idea. So, yeah, that's just, yeah. And now it's really, you can get away with that in the club. But if you really want to work and be a working comedian, you don't want to be like really dirty.
Yeah.
And I say, if you're going to be dirty, be creative dirty, like a Robert Schimmel. Robert Schimmel was dirty, but he was brilliant.
Brilliant at it. Yes, I agree.
Don't do it just to be gratuitous.
Right.
Gratuitously vulgar. It's not. It's not.
Right.
You're really not going to go far.
What's the best and worst of being a comedian? Best part, worst part?
The best and worst part. The best part is for me is the creativity. Is writing. That's why I like to write too. Is doing new things, trying something new on stage. That gets me. I could do an hour show, get a standing ovation. Somebody say, "Oh, that was a great show." And I go, "Yeah," because I said, "Oh, I knew that all worked."
Right.
But if I did I got this new joke that worked.
You're wondering if it's going to work or not. And
I'm
you're
excited.
yes.
I did that, and so I love the whole creative process.
You can have the one I did, by the way. You can.
Yeah. I'm going to open up with that. Next place I don't want to work ever again.
I guarantee they'll get a laugh. Come so far to left field, forget about it.
And the worst part was just, well, you know what? I used to have to travel all the time. Traveling used to be fun. You used to get on a plane and you'd go somewhere. It was fun. Now it's a hassle. And so I don't travel quite as much as I used to and everything. But I hated being on the road, sitting in a hotel room, and waiting for that 45 minutes every night and everything. I said, geez, if I was home, I could be doing I could be drawing, I could be doing something, playing my guitar, I could be doing anything else. But so I didn't like that isolation type of thing, because I'm a people person. And so I didn't like some guys that didn't have a life, didn't have a family, didn't have everything. To them, the road, oh great, they put me up in a hotel room. This is great. But to me, that was kind of torture. So, and giving up the weekend. Not that I'm not working. And my mother goes, I don't like you. Why are you working so much? I said, I'm not in a coal mine, I'm not drilling underground. I'm telling jokes, and you make people happy. So, what's better than that?
What was your experience like in LA when you went out there?
Hated it.
How come? Because they didn't have the Boston accent?
Well, I was a prosecutor and I was a defense attorney. I met more jerks in the entertainment business than I did in the courtroom, and that's including the lawyers. And it's just, and one thing you learn about LA is it's not necessarily about talent. There's a whole different criteria, and sometimes the talent has absolutely nothing to do with it. And if I had a buck for everybody in LA said, I can't believe that nobody gave you a chance here. But you know what? That was kind of my no place like home moment, where I said, I can work out of Boston, I can come here when I want and everything, but LA was kind of like, it's kind of sleazy.
Duplicitous.
I didn't like, and you know what? I think it was a problem. You know what one of the problems was is that I could see through the bull, these people, and they would take advantage of people coming in, and everybody there is kind of like destitute because they're trying to start out, they're struggling and everything, but. It was weird for me because most people struggle at the beginning of their career, and I had achieved success here. I could go all over the Northeast and walk into a club and they'd put me on. I was booked beyond thing, and then I went to LA and I went backwards. So if I had left out of college and I had cinder blocks and 2x4s for a cabinet, I'd go, this is the best cinder block I had. This is better than what I used to have. But now I kind of went backwards. But I learned so much about myself being there. I learned to be a better writer. I wrote a series of books about diaries, and it kept me writing. It kept me creative. And I started to, my comedy evolved, and so it was a very good learning experience. But I also learned that I belong here. So
yeah,
that's
and
good.
Speaking of here, so your sense of humor came from your dad, right?
Yeah, well,
And Uncle
my
Vito?
dad and my father, Irish father, my Italian Uncle Vito, we all live in the same house. My Italian grandparents lived there. Everybody spoke Italian and everything. And my father told jokes, and my uncle told stories. He'd take a real story about the Italian aunt with the mustache that's better than his, and my father would be talking, two Irish guy, Patty, and some, and I would watch them, and the people, they would make people laugh, and they'd gather around the kitchen table, and my father would get me up at night, on a Sunday night. Let Paul come. He's going to school tomorrow. Let him watch the comedian on Ed Sullivan. So I watched all the comedians on Ed Sullivan, and that was an influence. And my uncle Vito had Bill Cosby albums, and I played them over and over again. He was a great storyteller. So I was a combination. So really, people would ask me at the beginning, who are your influences in comedy? I'd think of these comedians, Boston comedians or national comedians, but it really was my uncle and my father, and as a result, my family were all funny. My brothers, no heckler I've ever encountered was as bad as my family. So, that's
so true.
That's where you learn to defend for yourself.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Comes from the family,
Yeah, absolutely.
whether it's the good or the bad.
Well, same way
Whether-
Scott's
right.
family
Yeah.
influenced him in
Right.
ways, and everybody's family is different. It depends what you do with it. He turned that into
Something
something
positive.
good,
Right.
Right.
And some people, it depends what you do. And I used to say that about, and it applies to a lot of things. Like, as an example, if you grew up and your parents beat you, you could grow up to be a parent. There's a lot of people in the middle, but some people go, I'm going to beat my kids because they're going to see what it was like for me to grow up. Or you look at your kids and go, I will never let that happen to my kids. So that depends on you. How do you take your background, and how do you process that, and how do you define yourself from that?
Right.
Right.
And then look at what you said about Judge Zoll. 1 out of 12 people it worked for, but
Right.
it comes down to personal responsibility.
Absolutely. You can attest to that, right?
Right.
Yeah, listen, we all make mistakes. I try to learn and grow every single day because I'm not sure if I'll be here tomorrow. So when JFK and Princess Di died within that kind of same block, I said, what do they all have? They have amazing, they had money, they had fame, they could influencers, but they're dead and they can't do anything. So I said, I'm going to live every single day as if it's my last. So when I'm gone, I'll be like, yeah, that was good. I'm good. Okay. Well, okay.
I was thinking of faking my death like Eddie and the Cruisers, just so my
Yeah,
paintings would go up.
That'd be great.
All of a sudden, I'd be a huge star once I was
You
dead.
bring that one to
Yeah.
Sports World. I'm sure he'd love to see you. That one with the big
Phil-
puppy.
Phil's a friend of mine, yeah.
He calls me all the time. He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
So Scott, you sound like a good dad. So your daughter Ayla is on the country music station?
Yeah,
is it?
she's still performing. She's about
Yep.
this big now. She's
Oh, yeah.
expecting in the end of July. She's out in San Diego, but she's at Country 102.5 as the morning co-host, and still performs all over the world. Did a lot of AFE, USO tours for our troops. She was on the last plane out of Turkey when it kind of went sideways a couple of years ago. And Ariana's the head veterinarian at an animal hospital up in Portsmouth. And yeah, listen, I was Gail, as you know, my wife Gail Huff, she was at News Center 5. She would leave the house at 3 in the morning. And I would literally put the kids to bed, I'd get them up, and she would get that from like after school up until 7 p.m. So I did everything. So in the mornings I would dress them, and Gail would have all these wonderful clothes, and they'd say, Dad, what do we wear? Just go get something. So they'd have leopard stripes, and then they
I
said,
think that was one of my favorite parts of the
I
book.
know it. I
That
know
was
it.
it, watching it and seeing Gail drive up, horrified
Yeah.
at what she picked up at school.
Yeah, and then I'd say, Dad, we got to comb my hair. I said, okay, just bend over. And when I bent it over, I just put in a scruff of like pebbles, and all right, see you later. Good to go.
Well, they turned out all right, so you
Yeah.
did okay.
I mean,
buddy.
Ayla, she played boys football, played
wow.
basketball against the boys, committed at Boston College at 15 because of that. She was very aggressive. I don't know where she got it from, but and yeah, listen, they're good kids, and we have a great granddaughter and a grandson on the way, and like Murph is indicating, I mean, you have the family influences. That some of us didn't have that, and the influences that we had were bad, but it was good coaches, a judge. That's why when you're involved in like the Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCA's, you're going out and giving speeches or talks. Because I'm a sexual abuse survivor, I'm a domestic violence or family violence survivor. I was just a knucklehead. I wasn't a bad person, remember back in the day, but I was angry. I was just pissed off that my mother was allegedly making all these mistakes. But what I didn't know until I got older is that back in the 60s and 70s, if you didn't have a college education, you needed a guy to keep you, in a house. And that was the control that they had. And she didn't have any control, and I blamed her. And I didn't really know, but I know now.
Right.
I get it now. And we obviously, cared very deeply for each other. So anyway.
I'm very proud of you, what you've done, with that background. I always have been.
Thanks.
So, it's funny how the neighborhood,
I know,
things
it's interesting because you were...
Scotty, I had a friend. He was a bartender. Then he became a manager. Then he was a part owner of a restaurant. Then he became the owner of the restaurant. I called up. No, it's a guy. I won't say. But I called up one day. Hi, the restaurant. Is Bobby there? Oh, we don't have a Bobby here. He said, oh, you mean Robert? I go, he's Robert now? I says, oh yeah, I'd like to talk to Robert. And he said, hello? He said, what? Bobby, what's going on? You're Robert now? Well, I like him to call me Robert. I said, I would like you to call me Your Majesty. How about that?
Click.
But I mean, that's what it is. You think back, to me, he's playing basketball in the backyard with my friends, and we're just all kids, and that's my reference point.
And we have I have probably 10 friends that we're still close, and we won't speak for a year, and then we'll speak, and it's like we saw each other yesterday.
Exactly.
We'll go away for a weekend. We'll go play golf. We'll go out for Thanksgiving brunch or dinner or whatever, and we still crack on each other like it was yesterday, and we're still ultra competitive. And I'm sure you have the same group.
Sure, of course.
It was it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that part of this school was really good because we did everything together, and still quite.
And you know what? Looking at the way things are now, I'm glad we grew up when we grew up.
Yeah, I know. It's a little unusual. I mean, I came back to a different country here between a lot of what we're seeing. The lack of, one of the questions I have for you, and this is a serious one, is you see guys like Chappelle. I mean, I've spoken to Sweeney and obviously Lenny and all our friends, and one night Sweeney he was out there doing his shtick, and it was just getting so neutral. Finally says, screw it, I'm just going to go back to what I was doing, and he just started going ballistic. His old routine. Cracking on everybody, and I've always felt that you can crack on anybody, regardless of who it is, as long as it's in jest and it's in fun, because we're laughing at ourselves. That's comedy. But I'll tell you, your business must be very, very challenging now because you got to be politically correct.
And part of me is saying I don't want to succumb to that. Part of me is resisting that. But the funny thing is and some people, you can't talk about these people because you're not part of it. I said, wait a second. I make fun of myself mostly. I make fun of my family, my girlfriend, my relationships with people, politicians, and everything. Are you equal? Are you an exalted class that I can't even address? But if there's no animosity, some people get triggered. They just hear something without listening to the content. Like if there's no animosity behind it, if you're just fun, then you're not putting somebody down. Right. You're not being derogatory. Then loosen up. Is it the comedians that have changed, or is it the audience that's changed?
Well, I usually am. They usually put me in the front row, and I'm like, bring it on. It's so fun. I love it.
But
crack on me all you want. I don't care.
But I say, some of these people who are real activists, who would be that type of people, would storm out. They don't go to comedy shows. So Jimmy Tingle, he's a Cambridge comic, and he's the opposite politically than I am, and he said, geez, I did my thing and the people boo me, but I think the crowds are a little more center right. Or I says, you know why, Jimmy? I says, your people would never go to a club named Giggles. Or maybe if the club was named Misery Loves Company, or you'd go for Unhappy Hour or something. And I thought he was going to be mad. He goes, yeah, you're right. So, I mean, but so sometimes you don't get those people there. And but part of me says, I have an obligation to make a point sometime. But then again, going back to what I said before, but make it funny. Don't do it. Right. Don't make a point for the sake of making a point if you don't have an entertainment aspect behind it.
So when you go to a comedy night, you should expect to be cracked on, have something that you care deeply about be criticized or cracked on, you know, because it's comedy, it's a joke.
But I'm not, some of these guys, going back to my mother talking about being attacked, I don't antagonize people. You know, my thing, even if I say it, it's saying with whimsical, you know.
Right, whimsy.
And they know that I'm cracking, and there's no anger behind it. There's nothing, anything like that. So, but some comedians are confrontational, and they generate confrontation, you know. So it's a different situation. Everybody's different.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of political correctiveness, you obviously met former President Trump. What was your relationship with him, or do you still have a relationship?
Yeah, well, you know, obviously as a senator, I met with President Obama and now President Biden often. I've been over Biden's house, you know, many times, had beers with him, St. Patrick's Day breakfast,
nice.
called me all the time, had lunch or dinner with him, you know, so, you know, we got along, you know. I mean, I try to treat everybody with you know, some respect, and he is the president, so I don't agree with him on anything he's doing now, and I don't think he's doing well at all. And President Trump, yeah, listen, I wanted somebody who would be a change maker and, you know, go in and basically, you know, break everything, because when I was there, I was disgusted by you know, you have people there 40, 50 years. I mean, they used to roll in Strom Thurmond and raise his hand, and they're just so beholden to the special interest and to the parties versus their constituents here. And yeah, so when he picked me as the ambassador, yeah, it was an honor to serve. But if Joe Biden picked me, I'd go serve too. I don't know if I could, though, because I don't believe what he's doing on the international level, especially with China and, you know, Iran and everything else that you're seeing. But yeah, listen, President Trump, what you see is what you get. One thing I do remember, though, was when I was the ambassador in New Zealand, we had the Christchurch massacre. He was the first one to call me immediately. So, what do you need? And we got it within seconds, literally within seconds, to make sure that there wouldn't be another, maybe, you know, usually there's a second round or there's other people involved. You know, you go in and all the first response, then they do another attack. So when he gave me his word, it was golden. When he was pushing back and holding China's feet to the fire, Iran, look at our border now, 1 million people since in the last 6 months. So we don't know who they are, what they're doing. They don't even need to get a COVID shot or COVID test. Are you kidding me? And then we're held to a standard. We're being mandated all the time to do things. So it's upside down world in this country lately. And you know, while I didn't agree with President Trump or President Biden on everything, you know, I respect the fact that they're the leaders, and we live in a country where you have succession every 4 years, which is cool.
My friend's a vet, and he's waiting. He needs an essential procedure at the VA. He had to wait a month and a half.
Yeah, it's unacceptable.
And you're not taking care of our veterans. I mean, those are people you should have priority.
Yeah. Veteran suicide's out of control. Teen suicide as a result of COVID, the depression's out of control. But this border issue with the fentanyl coming in from China and going right up from Mexico. My wife went to the border, saw it, exactly what was happening. It's outrageous. You can't.
It's one more trip than Carmela took.
Yeah, that's right. And she went up to the northern border yesterday. Same thing happening. We have to get our country back. We have to get us back to some type of common sense, because this $1 trillion spending, forgiving student loans, inflation, it's because we're spending too much. That's why I have inflation. Well, we could have another show on all that stuff. Sorry, we have 33 seconds left. So.
Any last questions from my co-host?
Well, if it did, it would go on further, so.
I'm glad I got to see my friend
Yeah,
again.
same here.
Hey,
if anyone wants to follow me, they can go to @sen, S-E-N, Scott Brown, and go to scottbrown-diplomats.com for our band schedule.
yeah.
Murph,
Okay.
you Twitter, Facebook, where are you?
PDangelo.com. I'm on Facebook. I have a whole artwork page on Facebook too.
Cool.
And
Well,
stuff.
thank you, ladies, as
Yeah,
well.
thank you very much for coming on the
Thank you
show.
very much.
Go
Thank you.
Warriors! Ow!
Thank you.
All right, buddy, thank you.